Hello. I'm Lydia, 27 years old, and just the other day, my father pointed at me in front of a judge, who happens to be his buddy, and declared, "This girl just squanders what she hasn't earned." He was demanding that I hand over every penny of the inheritance my grandfather specifically left to me in his will. The judge nodded along like my dad's personal supporter, while my father's lawyer grinned confidently, clearly believing he was destined to win. Where are you tuning in from? Share your location in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt utterly betrayed by family. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's to come. Seeing that judge nodding as if he were cheering for my father filled me with certainty about the situation. I had sensed this conspiracy brewing ever since I stumbled upon those photos of them together during my dad's campaign years ago. Oh, those politicians and their friends, such a clever little club they think they are part of. But let's rewind to how we arrived at this courtroom clash. This tale began 27 years ago when I entered the world, and my mother exited it. Congressman Richard Hayes was never cut out to be a father, making that abundantly clear from the very start when he decided that my birth was to blame for my mother's complications. Yes, you heard that right. My father pointed the finger at me for her death. What a gem he is. While he chased a political career, my paternal grandparents were my saving grace. Patricia and William Hayes didn't just step in, they became my entire universe. They took me home from the hospital, leaving my father to retreat back to Washington, likely relieved to escape the responsibility of raising a child he never wanted. Honestly, their sacrifice was my blessing. My grandparents thought if they showered me with love and patience, perhaps their son would eventually change his mind and become part of my life. Such sweet, innocent souls who couldn't fathom how disappointing their own child could be. Living with them was like being in a storybook, except the prince had no interest in the princess. Grandpa William would share bedtime stories while Grandma Patricia guided me through watercolor painting. They filled every birthday, Christmas, and school event with enough love that I almost forgot someone else was supposed to be there, almost. Those Christmas mornings were blissful until I'd catch my grandma glancing at her phone, waiting for a call that was never made. Grandpa William would clear his throat to distract me with fresh presents, but I could see the sadness lurking in his eyes every time. I was probably 5 when I first asked why my daddy never came around. Grandma Patricia's expression faltered for just a moment before she quickly recovered. "He's busy helping people, sweetheart, important work." Even at 5, I could sense the dishonesty in that answer. But I learned to keep quiet, realizing that every query about my father pierced the hearts of the two people I cherished most. By middle school, I had stopped anticipating his presence entirely. At parent-teacher meetings, it was always Grandpa William jotting down notes, and during school plays, Grandma Patricia occupied the front row with a vintage camcorder. There was no substituting for father-daughter dances either. Grandpa William would twirl me on the dance floor while I pretended not to notice the other girls with their actual dads. Yet, here's the truth, we were truly happy, genuinely, wholeheartedly happy. Just the three of us, facing the world together. We didn't require a politician who couldn't even remember he had a daughter. Despite this, my grandparents would call him every major holiday. I watched as Grandpa William nervously dialed that number, his hands trembling, hoping this time would be different. Spoiler alert, it never was. Their unyielding hope should have signaled to me just how far my father would go when money was on the line. The pattern of his absence became so predictable, I could have set a clock by it. Christmas brought expensive gifts delivered by his assistant with no personal message. A birthday meant a generic card signed by someone who definitely wasn't him. And graduation? Complete silence, as if I'd vanished. Meanwhile, Grandpa William was busy building his business empire while Grandma Patricia managed their family money like the Southern aristocrat she was born to be. They could have spoiled me. They could have turned me into one of those trust fund kids you see on reality TV. Instead, they instilled values that were completely lost on my father. Money is a tool, Lydia, Grandpa William would remind me as he pored over his business documents at the kitchen table. It's meant to serve a purpose, not to become the purpose. Wise advice from a man whose son clearly never absorbed that lesson. Grandma Patricia remained remarkably grounded, even though she hailed from a prestigious old money background. She dedicated her time to volunteering at the Children's Hospital, teaching Sunday school, and somehow always made it a point to assist me with my homework. No matter how busy her schedule got with charity board meetings, they attended every event for me. Every soccer match where I spent countless minutes on the sidelines rather than the field. Every science fair where my volcano resembled a pitiful mud pile compared to everyone else's projects. Every piano recital where I butchered Chopin as if I were a tone-deaf elephant. Meanwhile, my father's political career soared. Congressman Hayes, the poster child for family values and financial prudence. The irony was so thick you could slice it with a chainsaw. I'd catch glimpses of him on TV, delivering fervent speeches about the necessity of supporting our children and nurturing strong family ties, and I'd think, oh really, Dad? Tell me more about family support. I'm all ears. When I hit 16, something inside me shifted. Perhaps it was typical teenage rebellion, or maybe I was simply fed up with masking how much his absence hurt. I began to ask the questions my grandparents had dodged for years. Why doesn't he ever call me? I demanded one evening after catching him on CNN talking about educational reform. He speaks about children's futures on national television, yet forgets that his own daughter has one. Grandpa Williams put down his newspaper deliberately. Your father is grappling with complex emotions stemming from your mother's passing, sweetheart. Grief impacts people in various ways. But for 16 years? I shot back. That isn't grief, Grandpa. That's a conscious choice, a really terrible one. Grandma Patricia's eyes brimmed with tears, yet she remained silent. After 16 years of covering for their son, even they were running out of plausible excuses. High school meant prepping for college, and my grandparents threw themselves wholeheartedly into it. SAT tutors, college tours, application fees, they supported every aspiration I voiced. When I got accepted into Duke University with a partial scholarship, they hosted a celebration dinner fit for a small nation. Meanwhile, my father's congratulatory card arrived, boasting generic text and his assistant's initials, devoid of any personal touch. At that moment, I officially stopped yearning for his recognition. What's the point in seeking approval from someone who views you as a burden he never agreed to bear? During college breaks, I returned home and observed my grandparents getting a bit older, a little more delicate. They asked about my classes, friends, and future plans with genuine curiosity, proving they genuinely cared about who I was becoming. At 21 years old, I'd never had a sincere conversation with my biological father. 21 years filled with birthdays, holidays, and milestones he chose to overlook. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business. Grandpa William shed tears during my valedictorian address, while Grandma Patricia captured approximately 300 moments on camera. My father's usual reserved seat remained empty, as expected. That evening at dinner, Grandpa William raised his champagne flute. To Lydia, who demonstrates each day that real families are built on love, not just genetics. In hindsight, I should have suspected he was concocting something grand, something that would ultimately compel his son to reveal his true nature. But at that moment, I merely considered it another toast from the man who'd been more of a father to me than my actual father ever was. Graduation from college was supposed to signify the start of my independent adult journey. I moved back home temporarily while hunting for jobs, and honestly, I was ecstatic to be reunited with my grandparents. However, the house felt different, quieter in a way that had nothing to do with my absence. Grandma Patricia wasn't quite herself anymore. She moved more slowly in the mornings, and her hands showed a slight tremor while pouring coffee. She'd tire quickly during our weekend shopping excursions, needing to take breaks more often than before. Initially, I explained it away as the natural effects of aging, considering she was in her 70s. Yet, an instinctive voice nagged at me, indicating this was more than just aging. Maybe we should book a checkup with Dr. Morrison, I suggested one Tuesday morning when she slept until 10 a.m., completely unlike her regular 6 a.m. routine. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm fine," she brushed me off with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just a bit tired from all that gardening yesterday." Except I hadn't seen her tending to the garden in weeks. The changes stacked up gradually, missed appointments she'd never skipped before, repeated questions in the same conversation, and moments of confusion she attempted to mask with her natural cheerfulness. But I could see the worry creeping into her eyes, and Grandpa William noticed it too. I could see it clearly in the way he lingered nearby, protectively finishing her thoughts when she searched for words, and gently guiding conversations when she appeared confused. By Christmas, we could no longer maintain the facade. The woman who had meticulously organized every family event for years struggled to recall even the date. She'd begin making breakfast, only to lose track of it until the smoke alarm blared. On one occasion, I caught her in the laundry room, holding one of my shirts and gazing at it as if it were completely unfamiliar. "I can't remember what I was doing," she confessed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Lydia, I'm scared." That's when the reality hit us. We needed assistance. The diagnosis arrived on a rainy Tuesday in January, early onset Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Morrison shared the news as compassionately as possible, but there's no gentle way to inform a family that their cornerstone is slowly fading away. I watched Grandpa William age a decade in that doctor's office. The once formidable man, who built businesses and guided me through every childhood hardship, crumbled before my eyes. His hands trembled as he inquired about treatments, prognosis, and how much time we had left. "Typically, it's 2 to 5 years, Dr. Morrison replied softly. "But every case is unique. The priority now is to foster a safe, loving environment and to ensure her comfort." The next day, I resigned from my new job. "Lydia, you can't halt your life for me," Grandma Patricia insisted during one of her lucid spells. "You have so much in front of you." "My life is right here," I replied with conviction. "You raised me when no one else would. Now it's my turn to care for you." And I truly meant it. They had given me everything precious: love, stability, values, and purpose. The least I could do was dedicate my time to them in their hour of need. Over the next 2 years, I took on the role of her full-time caregiver. There were good days when she remembered my name, and we joyously flipped through old photo albums, laughing at my awkward teenage snaps. Yet there were also heart-wrenching days when she regarded me as a stranger and asked when her daughter would visit. But the worst wasn't merely witnessing her decline, that brought immense pain. The most agonizing part was watching Grandpa William pine for his son during those 2 years, pleading for him to come see his dying mother. "She talks about you," Grandpa William would express over the phone, his voice trembling. "Please, Richard, just one visit. She asks for you daily." The reply was always the same: "Too busy, significant votes on the horizon, perhaps next month." But next month never arrived. Watching my grandfather implore his own son for the basic courtesy of love felt even harsher than seeing my grandmother slip away. Have you ever faced a devastating diagnosis of a loved one? Share your stories in the comments below. Grandma Patricia passed away on a rainy Thursday morning in September, holding my hand as Grandpa William whispered his love to her. Her final clear words were a plea for Richard, bewildered as to why her son hadn't come to see her. My father didn't show up for the funeral. Let me reiterate that for the slow ones at the back, Congressman Richard Hayes, the man who was quick to champion family values, couldn't find the time to attend his own mother's burial. He called 3 days later, not to express sympathy or check on his father, but to ask about inheriting the family lake house that had belonged to my grandmother's family for 4 generations. "She's not even buried yet," I overheard Grandpa William say into the phone, his voice trembling with an outrage I had never witnessed before. "Your mother is dead, Richard. Dead. And you're calling about property?" I stood outside his study, listening to my grandfather finally convey his feelings about 3 decades of neglect and selfishness. The conversation quickly escalated, with Grandpa William using language I'd never heard from him before. "You want to talk inheritance?" he shouted. "Here's what you're getting from me, nothing. You couldn't be troubled to visit your dying mother, so you don't deserve a damn thing from her family." My father argued about his legal claim to family property, prompting Grandpa William to truly unleash his fury. "Legal rights?" he screamed. "You forfeited your rights the moment you abandoned this family. Don't you dare discuss what you deserve." The call ended with Grandpa William slamming the phone down with such force that I feared it would shatter. For the first time ever, I heard him unleash a torrent of curse words. "That selfish, ungrateful piece of," he began, stopping as he noticed me by the door. His expression softened instantly. "I'm sorry you had to hear that, sweetheart." "Don't apologize," I responded with firmness. He deserved every word, and probably more. That call marked a significant change in my grandfather. After years of wishing his son would change, the man finally came to terms with the fact that Richard Hayes had fully embraced the path he had chosen, prioritizing his political ambitions over everything else. Following the funeral, the house turned into a nostalgic relic of moments long past. Grandpa William drifted from room to room like a specter, gently brushing against Grandma Patricia's cherished chair, adjusting already perfectly aligned photos, and sitting at the kitchen table where she used to savor her morning coffee. At times, I'd find him there at dawn, gazing at her vacant chair with tears cascading down his cheeks. This rock of my life was utterly broken, and I knew I had to be the glue to hold us both together. "She always said you were the best thing that came from Richard," he confided one evening as we sorted through her jewelry. "She was right. You're everything she envisioned you'd grow to be." We created new habits too, along with the profound silence. I moved into the guest room nearest to his, ready to assist him if the need arose in the night. We began taking strolls around the property in the evenings, chatting about everything from business to memories, carefully sidestepping conversations about how much we missed her. I enrolled him in a grief support group at the community center and, unbeknownst to him, joined one myself. Though we were both submerged in sorrow, at least we were submerged together. Grandpa William had always excelled in the business realm, but I saw grief affect him in unexpected ways. Some days, he was back to his usual self, managing conference calls and poring over financial reports. Other days, he appeared adrift and fragile, repeating the same question multiple times. His business partners started turning to me for direction, while his lawyers began inviting me to crucial meetings. His financial advisor slowly transitioned from consulting him to consulting me as Grandpa William lost interest in the minutiae he'd once focused on obsessively. "You have a knack for this, Mr. Peterson," his estate attorney remarked after a particularly challenging meeting. "Your grandfather trained you well." Perhaps he did, or maybe I had unknowingly absorbed more from those childhood evenings watching him work than I'd realized. Regardless, I found myself adept at managing matters when it came to protecting loved ones, which was a blessing because I would soon need every ounce of those skills. The 3 years following Grandma Patricia's passing emerged as the most critical of my life, not just for looking after the man who raised me, but also for discovering my own capabilities when the people I cared about were at risk. Grandpa William never fully surrendered hope that his son might change. He would occasionally mention my father, wondering if grief might eventually bridge their divide. I learned to keep my opinions to myself, yet deep down, I was sure that someone who had abandoned his dying mother wouldn't suddenly develop a conscience. Throughout those years, my father's political aspirations thrived. He was re-elected twice, was being considered as a potential Senate candidate, and frequently appeared on talk shows espousing, believe it or not, the value of family unity and moral responsibility. The man who hadn't reached out to his grieving father in 3 years was publicly advocating for strong family ties. You honestly could not script irony that perfect. "Do you think he'll ever comprehend what he's lost?" Grandpa William asked one evening as we watched the sunset from the back porch. "I believe he is exactly who he aims to be," I replied candidly. "Someone who doesn't concern himself with how his ambitions may affect others." Grandpa William nodded thoughtfully. Then he's lost more than he'll ever realize. It wasn't until much later that I understood he was already strategizing to ensure my father's selfishness would not harm me as it had harmed them. The early signs were subtle. Meetings with Mr. Peterson where I wasn't included, phone calls that abruptly ended when I walked in, documents being reviewed in private instead of seeking my input like he typically did for everything else. When I inquired about it, he would simply smile, claiming he was updating some old files, nothing urgent. I trusted him implicitly, which is likely why I never grasped that he was orchestrating what would become the most incredible surprise of my life. Grandpa William's health slowly deteriorated over that final year, but his mental acuity regarding business and family remained robust. He still rose at 6 each morning, devoured multiple newspapers cover to cover, and could recall investment details that astounded his advisors. Yet, I noticed the subtle shifts. He became fatigued more easily during our evening walks, began requiring afternoon naps, something the vibrant man who had nurtured me had never needed before. His appetite waned, and he would push food around his plate at the dinners I had learned to prepare using Grandma Patricia's cherished recipe cards. "Are you feeling okay?" I would often notice him gazing out the window instead of finishing his meal, so I'd ask, "What's on your mind?" He'd respond with a wistful grin, "Just thinking of your grandmother." Some days, missing her is like a deep, physical ache, he would admit. According to Dr. Morrison, his heart was simply exhausting itself, not due to illness, but from a lifetime of labor and the grief from losing his lifelong partner. "He's grieving in his own unique way," the doctor clarified. Sometimes, emotional distress and physical fatigue become indistinguishable. I could relate. There were nights I'd hear him conversing with Grandma Patricia's photo on his nightstand, sharing details about his day or seeking her advice on business matters. It might have been heart-wrenching if it wasn't so incredibly heartwarming. In what turned out to be his last year, our bond deepened even more. He began recounting tales from his youth, his early entrepreneurial efforts, the blunders he'd made, and the wisdom he'd acquired. It felt like he was imparting all the vital lessons he wished for me to grasp about existence and resilience. "The most crucial lesson I can offer you," he declared one evening while we relaxed in his study, "is that loyalty is something to be earned, not something that comes by birthright. Your father believes that family grants an automatic right to forgiveness and support, but that's not the essence of true relationships." He was readying me for something significant, though I didn't quite grasp what it was at that moment. During those months, the lawyers began visiting more regularly. Mr. Peterson would appear with hefty folders, and they'd retreat into the study for hours at a time. Whenever I inquired, Grandpa William would simply mention he was arranging his affairs to ease the burden on me in the future. I should have pressed for more information, yet the thought of a life without him felt unbearable. He represented my last link to childhood, to everything stable and loving in my life. Yet, he was orchestrating something monumental. The end arrived unexpectedly on a Tuesday morning in March. I discovered Grandpa William nestled in his beloved leather chair in the study, still wearing his reading glasses and clutching the morning's financial reports. He appeared serene, as if he had merely dozed off amidst his investment review. The paramedic confirmed that his heart had simply stopped, most likely before dawn. No agony, no strife, just a serene conclusion to a life well spent. Before reaching out to anyone else, I called Mr. Peterson, though I couldn't precisely articulate why. Perhaps it was because Grandpa William had always faced tough times by first consulting his lawyer. Or maybe it was my sense that his passing would lead to complexities I wasn't ready for. "I'll be right there," Mr. Peterson replied instantly. "Do not contact anyone else until I arrive, Lydia. That's crucial." Within an hour, he sat across from me in the very study where Grandpa William had taken his last breath, clutching a hefty envelope inscribed with my name in my grandfather's distinctive script. "Your grandfather was incredibly meticulous," Mr. Peterson began with caution. "He foresaw several potential scenarios following his passing and wanted to ensure your protection." "Protection from what?" I pondered. But I was on the threshold of discovery. The reading of the will was set for the following Friday, granting me just a week to digest what Mr. Peterson warned would be an unusual circumstance. I spent those days organizing funeral details while trying to decipher the lawyer's enigmatic hints about possible ordeals ahead. Grandpa William's service was both beautiful and devastating. The church was filled with business partners, community leaders, and family friends who had witnessed his integrity over 8 decades. I delivered a heartfelt eulogy about the man who had taught me everything essential about life, love, and steadfastness. My father, once again, did not attend the funeral. No phone call, no flowers, nothing to acknowledge the passing of his father. 3 days after losing the last parent he would ever have, Congressman Richard Hayes remained utterly silent. Some things never change, do they? The will reading took place in Mr. Peterson's downtown office, adorned with dark wood paneling and serious leather chairs. I arrived early, a bit anxious and in part because promptness was one of the myriad values Grandpa William ingrained in me. Coffee? Mr. Peterson suggested, gesturing toward an elegant service nearby. This may take some time. I was adding cream to my cup when the office door opened, revealing my father. It had been months since our last in-person encounter, probably at some political fundraiser where he'd merely nodded at me, treating me like an unknown acquaintance. Today, he seemed particularly engaged. It's amusing how money sparks an instant interest in familial connections. Lydia, he greeted with his rehearsed politician's smile, as if we were old pals catching up over lunch. I'm sorry to hear about William. This must be very challenging for you. The way he casually referred to his father by his first name, as if they were peers rather than a father and son who had drifted apart, sent shivers down my spine. Nevertheless, I managed to nod politely and redirected my attention to my coffee. Next to arrive was my father's attorney, a sharply dressed man in a pricey suit who introduced himself as Helena Morrison. He clasped hands with my father as if they were longtime associates, which they likely were. Shall we proceed? Mr. Peterson inquired once we were all gathered around the conference table. The initial portion of the will was pretty straightforward. It involved charitable contributions to causes that Grandpa William had supported for many years, generous gifts to loyal employees, and a college fund for the groundskeeper's children. But then came the game changer. To my son, Richard Hayes, Mr. Peterson read in his precise lawyerly tone. I leave my profound disappointment in the man he's chosen to become and my heartfelt hope that he will, in due time, realize what he sacrificed by forsaking his family. You could practically hear a pin drop in that room. My father's face shifted through a series of vibrant colors, first red, then pale white, and finally an alarming shade of purple. His lawyer started to protest, but Mr. Peterson raised a hand to silence him. To my cherished granddaughter, Lydia Hayes, who has exhibited more love, loyalty, and integrity in 27 years than her father has shown in his entire existence. I bequeath the entirety of my estate. All my properties, investments, business holdings, and personal assets will pass to Lydia immediately upon my death. The subsequent silence was utterly deafening. If I thought the quiet following the will reading was awkward, the eruption that ensued was nothing short of volcanic. My father's lawyer sprang to his feet even before Mr. Peterson had completed the reading, launching into legal objections like a broken fire hose. This will is obviously a result of undue influence and diminished capacity, he declared with all the outrage money could muster. We will be filing challenges right away. But Mr. Peterson simply smiled as if he had anticipated this very response. Your grandfather foresaw such a reaction, Lydia. That's why he spent the last year carefully documenting his mental fitness and the rationale behind his choices. He pulled out another envelope, revealing medical records, psychological evaluations, and a handwritten letter dated just 2 weeks before Grandpa William's passing. He also wanted me to give you this, Mr. Peterson said, passing the letter to me to read once your father had heard the will. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded the paper and recognized Grandpa William's familiar script. My dearest Lydia, if you're reading this, then Richard has just discovered that actions carry consequences. You are my heir because you have earned it through love, loyalty, and character. He is not my heir because he opted for politics over family, ambition over love, and self-interest over responsibility. What follows will reveal his true nature to you. Trust Mr. Peterson. Trust yourself, and always remember that the best revenge is living well. All my love, Grandpa William. I looked up to find my father gazing at me with an expression I had never encountered before. Not sorrow, not regret, nor even embarrassment, just pure, calculated rage. That's when I understood this was only the onset of an all-out war. My father wasted no time being subtle. Within 48 hours of the will reading, his full political machinery was geared towards tearing down my reputation and pressuring me into submission. It began with reporters calling me, probing with loaded questions about my connection with my grandfather. Soon after, carefully curated articles popped up in local newspapers portraying family feuds and inheritance conflicts, spinning me as a manipulative gold digger who had taken advantage of a vulnerable elderly man. This media blitz was sophisticated and meticulously coordinated. It was most certainly not the work of a disgruntled family member. This was political opposition research turned against his own daughter. He's attempting to control the narrative, Mr. Peterson clarified during an urgent meeting at his office. Classic political maneuvering. Shape public opinion before the case reaches court. Next came the legal onslaught. Waves of motions questioning every facet of my relationship with my grandparents ensued. They wanted my medical records, my college transcripts, and my employment history, essentially anything they could use to depict me as unstable or financially needy. But here's the thing about growing up around business professionals, you learn to maintain thorough records. I had documentation for everything from my academic scholarships to my job offers to my choice to resign in order to care for Grandma Patricia. My life was an open book, and every page spoke to a story of someone who had never needed or solicited anything from anyone. The pressure increased dramatically as reporters began to camp outside my home, thrusting microphones at me every time I stepped out. Do you feel guilty about denying your son his rightful inheritance? They grilled, questioning whether I had exploited a grieving widower over a fortune from a man he hadn't even conversed with in 3 years. The nerve they had was truly astonishing. Yet, my father completely misestimated the situation. He mistakenly thought I still resembled that little girl yearning for his validation, who'd been wounded by his neglect, who'd do everything in her power to steer clear of confrontations with the influential Congressman Hayes. Instead, he was dealing with the woman his parents had nurtured. A woman who recognized that some battles are worth fighting, regardless of who stands opposite. And I was gearing up to remind him of exactly where my stubborn resolve came from. What do you think Lydia's next move should be? Share your thoughts down below. My father's strategic play unfolded 3 weeks prior to our court date, and I must say, it was genius in its simplicity. If he couldn't triumph legally on the merits, he would make sure he dictated who made the decision. As I perused the morning news, I stumbled upon a photo from a political fundraiser that captured Congressman Hayes sharing a chuckle with several local figures, including Judge Martin Crawford, who conveniently presided over probate cases in our area. The caption read, "Old friends from law school, still finding time for each other despite their hectic schedules." I stared at that photo for an agonizing moment, my stomach sinking. Judge Crawford would oversee our case in precisely 3 weeks. The same Judge Crawford who appeared to be such a close associate of my father that they posed for friendly snapshots at political affairs. Naturally, because why would anything in this scenario be just or simple? Interestingly, I had previously seen these photos of them together during my father's campaign seasons. The media had shared images, and there were mentions across social platforms, typical political camaraderie in a small state where everyone is acquainted. At the time, I hadn't paid much heed, just another politician cozying up to a local official. But now, with our inheritance case landing in Judge Crawford's courtroom, those seemingly innocent snapshots took on a far more sinister implication. I called Mr. Peterson right away. "This is highly irregular," he remarked after I faxed him the newspaper clipping. "A judge should recuse themselves if they maintain a personal relationship with one of the parties involved." Thus, we filed a motion requesting him to step aside. We could try, but it wouldn't be straightforward. Demonstrating a true conflict of interest would be essential, not merely establishing that they are acquainted professionally. If we challenge it, your father's team might argue that we are forum shopping due to our aversion to the assigned judge. The system was rigged, and my father completely understood how to manipulate it. Yet, from observing Grandpa William tackle business deals for 27 years, I learned that every system harbors vulnerabilities, and every powerful figure has secrets they wish to keep hidden. As the court date loomed closer, the legal strain intensified. My father's team filed incessant motions demanding access to every facet of my life, seeking anything to substantiate their theory of undue influence. They aimed for proof that I had isolated my grandfather from his devoted son, evidence I had exploited a bewildered elderly man for financial gain. Documentation insinuating that my alleged unstable mental state rendered me unfit to inherit anything. What they unearthed instead was a paper trail illustrating a woman who had never solicited or required anything, who had opted out of lucrative opportunities to care for family members in need. Their fishing expedition backfired spectacularly, but that didn't deter them from exploring new angles. Just 2 weeks before the hearing, the pressure campaign turned intensely personal. Somehow, and I'm certain it was purely coincidental, my home address was leaked to every news outlet in the state. Before I knew it, camera crews were stationed on my front lawn around the clock. Anonymous tips began surfacing on social media, casting doubt on my mental well-being and hinting at financial abuse of my grandfather. Blog entries questioned whether I was even capable of handling the inheritance I was allegedly trying to steal. It was a coordinated character assassination aimed at portraying me as precisely the kind of individual who would manipulate a vulnerable elderly man. The strategy was cunning, merciless, and entirely characteristic of a man who had prioritized politics over family his entire career. But while my father busied himself with tarnishing my reputation, I was quietly plotting something that would put an end to this farce once and for all. I had been pondering over the snapshots of him with Judge Crawford, not just the recent ones but every single image I'd seen throughout the years. From campaign rallies to charity events, they consistently posed together like longtime pals. And I was meticulously cataloging them all. My intention? If my father was going to manipulate the judicial system, I would ensure that everyone recalled the exact rules we were meant to follow. Leading up to our court date, I dedicated every minute I had to combing through old newspapers, campaign sites, and social media posts. The results were precisely what I anticipated. A treasure trove of photographic documentation depicted my father and Judge Crawford at numerous political and social gatherings. These weren't just formal encounters, they were casual, joyous moments captured with someone you genuinely like and trust. Fundraisers revealed them enjoying each other's company, and at charity events, they were seen with arms draped around one another. I even discovered images from family-style get-togethers featuring their wives in some shots. We weren't looking at mere professional acquaintances who happened to meet at official functions. This was a deep friendship. A bond robust enough to require Judge Crawford to recuse himself the instant our case arrived on his docket. I meticulously gathered copies of everything and arranged them chronologically. The pattern spoke volumes. This was no fleeting political camaraderie or a casual professional tie. They had shared a real closeness for years, likely dating back to their law school days mentioned in an old newspaper caption. Mr. Peterson examined my collection with intrigue but advised against getting too ahead of myself. "These images show they are friends," he mentioned, "but we still have to prove that their friendship results in a clear conflict of interest." The judge might contend he could remain impartial despite their closeness, even when one friend demanded he rob from the other. That very argument would be our approach. True, but judges have broad discretion, and Crawford could easily assert he was interpreting the law neutrally despite personal ties. Essentially, Judge Crawford might rule against me, claiming he was merely applying the will's terms objectively, and without any evidence of bias in open court. No one could counter this claim. The night before the hearing, I found myself in Grandpa William's study, going over all our preparations, medical records confirming his mental competency right up to his death, eyewitness accounts from doctors and business associates who frequently engaged with him, and documents showcasing the intricate planning behind his estate. Yet, my most potent asset wasn't any formal paperwork. It was a simple manila folder brimming with 24 photographs collected over 15 years, highlighting moments between Judge Crawford and my father at various events, from political rallies to intimate dinner parties. These images painted a picture of a bond strong enough that Crawford should never have considered hearing this case at all. In addition, I held a keen insight into my father's character, having observed him for 27 years. He was brimming with arrogance, accustomed to having his way and not particularly adept at concealing his emotions when things went awry. If Judge Crawford exhibited even a hint of the favoritism I suspected, my father would likely become overconfident, possibly saying something that laid bare the predetermined nature of this entire process. All that was left for me was to wait for the perfect moment to remind everyone in that courtroom of the rules that should govern this situation. On the morning of the hearing, I chose a navy blue suit that exuded professionalism and respectability. I wanted to present myself as someone deserving of serious consideration, not a young woman with wild claims. I meticulously organized those photographs, ready to deploy them when the moment arose. The courthouse buzzed with activity when I arrived. The news of the political family inheritance dispute had drawn a crowd, and reporters filled the hallway, eager for some drama. I passed them by without a word, radiating the confidence that Grandpa William instilled in me. Judge Crawford's courtroom was packed to the brim. My father sat at the plaintiff's table, embodying the image of a revered statesman wronged by his ungrateful daughter. He even donned his American flag lapel pin, as subtlety had never really been his thing. Upon seeing me, he attempted what he likely intended to be a fatherly smile, but it appeared more like a shark baring its teeth. Judge Crawford strode in, exuding his characteristic authority, confidently positioning himself behind the bench as if he held the reins of the entire courtroom. Little did he know, a storm was brewing on the horizon. The hearing kicked off just as I anticipated, with my father's attorney delivering a sensational legal performance aimed at portraying my grandfather as a confused old man being toyed with by his conniving granddaughter. They twisted medical records, summoned testimony from distant relatives who claimed that Grandpa William had changed in his final days, and presented financial documents in a manner that made my dedicated caregiving appear dubious rather than compassionate. It was all a meticulously constructed farce, but it was delivered with flair by high-priced lawyers who clearly knew how to captivate their audience, an audience that Judge Crawford was undeniably part of. He nodded along with their claims, posed sharp questions regarding my grandfather's mental health, and seemed genuinely troubled by the thought that a defenseless elderly man might have been exploited. The bias was glaring, it felt almost like an affront. There was nothing objective about this, it resembled a friend doing a favor for another friend. When it was finally our turn, Mr. Peterson methodically laid out our case, showcasing medical evaluations confirming Grandpa William's mental acuity right up until his passing, testimonials from doctors and colleagues reinforcing his clear rationale, and documents illustrating the meticulous thought he had dedicated to his estate planning. Yet, throughout our presentation, Judge Crawford's interest visibly dwindled. He started checking his watch, shuffling through papers, and asked far fewer questions than he had for my father's attorney. By the time Mr. Peterson concluded, it became painfully evident that Judge Crawford had already chosen his side. We were merely going through the motions of what resembled a fair trial while he geared up to announce the verdict his ally desired. That's when I realized it was time to shake things up. "Your Honor," Mr. Peterson announced as he wrapped up our formal argument, "before you render your decision, my client has something she'd like to express to the court." Judge Crawford's annoyance was palpable at the thought of the granddaughter interrupting instead of allowing the lawyers to carry the conversation. "Miss Hayes, this is quite unconventional. Your counsel has thoroughly presented your case," he remarked. I recognize that, Your Honor, I said, standing up slowly as I grasped the manila folder I'd placed beside my chair. However, there is a crucial point that I need to bring to your attention before any decisions are made regarding this case. I noticed my father's lawyer whispering urgently to him, likely cautioning him that I was about to unleash something he wasn't prepared for. Yet my father lounged back with a confident grin, probably convinced that whatever I was plotting couldn't possibly jeopardize his meticulously crafted victory. Little did he know what was on the horizon. Your Honor, I continued, my voice echoing clearly throughout the packed courtroom. Before you make a ruling, there's a significant matter you should consider. I opened the folder and revealed the first photograph, a recent newspaper clipping featuring Judge Crawford and my father sharing a laugh at a political event. This image captures you and my father together in what seems to be a social setting rather than an official capacity, I declared, holding it aloft for everyone to see. Judge Crawford's expression morphed from irritation to one of alarm. Miss Hayes, a professional relationship does not warrant recusal, he replied. You are absolutely right. I maintained a pleasant demeanor. A professional relationship alone doesn't necessitate recusal, but a close personal friendship certainly does. I then revealed another photograph, from an earlier campaign event where they looked like they were relishing a private celebration. And this photo from my father's first congressional campaign indicates a bond that transcends casual professional interaction. The courtroom fell into a profound silence, with reporters feverishly jotting down notes as my father's smug composure began to crumble. But that was just the warm-up. I continued unveiling photograph after photograph, each displaying Judge Crawford and my father in increasingly intimate and friendly situations throughout over a decade, campaign bashes showing them in high spirits, charity events featuring them posing like longtime pals, even what appeared to be family gatherings with both their spouses in tow. Your Honor, I asserted, maintaining a calm and professional tone. I have documentation over the past 15 years indicating that you and my father share a relationship that can only be described as a close personal friendship. Judge Crawford's complexion had drained of color, yet he struggled to retain his judicial stoicism. Miss Hayes, these claims are utterly inappropriate. I interjected, both politely and assertively. They're not just claims, they're solid facts, backed by photographic proof, news articles, and public records that cover numerous election cycles. I spread a collection of images across the defense table, snapshots from campaign fundraisers where your contributions fueled my father's political endeavors, gatherings where you vocally supported his run, and charity events where we've worked side by side on organizing committees. The silence in that courtroom was thunderous. My father looked at me as if he were seeing me for the first time, likely realizing, for the first time, that his overlooked daughter had been acutely observant all these years. Judge Crawford cleared his throat awkwardly. Miss Hayes, even if we were personal acquaintances, which I'm not admitting, I can be completely impartial regarding legal matters. That's when my father made a grave error. Rising from his seat, his face flushed with rage and frustration as he witnessed his meticulously crafted plan unraveling. He pointed at me and blurted out the devastating words that would ruin both their reputations. This girl only knows how to squander what she hasn't earned. Judge Crawford inadvertently nodded in agreement before he caught himself, his surprise showcasing the very bias he'd attempted to conceal, now evident for all reporters and court attendees to see. Fantastic. I locked eyes with Judge Crawford and unleashed the line I had been rehearsing for weeks. Let me clarify that in plain English for everyone, including this corrupt judge, if you act in favor of him, I will present undeniable evidence to the proper authorities proving your friendship, complete with public pictures of you together from his political campaigns. I have everything documented. You can't serve as both judge and friend simultaneously, or your career will be over. The courtroom was so silent that even a pin falling could have echoed across 3 counties. Judge Crawford's complexion shifted through various shades, pale to gray, and finally to a disturbing green. His hands trembled so violently that it was hard for him to grip his gavel. The man who had strolled into the courtroom with unwavering confidence in the predetermined result was now confronting the grim reality that his entire judicial career was about to spiral into disgrace. "We're not friends," he stuttered, his voice barely rising above a whisper. "And I will not show favoritism toward the plaintiff." His tone strengthened just a tad as he grasped that he had to salvage his reputation. "We have an explicit will from a man who was undeniably of sound mind when he penned it. Medical evidence affirms his mental competence, and witness accounts verify his intentions. There are no grounds to overturn his clearly articulated wishes." He halted, gulping hard. "The inheritance will remain precisely as William Hayes outlined in his will. Case dismissed." He struck the gavel with unsteady hands and dashed from the bench without observing proper procedures. My father sat frozen in his seat, staring at me as if I were an entirely new person. After 27 years of being deemed irrelevant, I just dismantled his entire scheme in under half an hour. Reporters surged toward the exits, cell phones pressed to their ears as they rushed to report the story of a lifetime. As the courtroom emptied out, my father stood up slowly and approached me. For a fleeting moment, I entertained the thought that he might genuinely attempt to apologize or explain himself to salvage our relationship. Instead, he fixed me with a gaze and declared, "You've wrecked everything I devoted my life to building." I replied calmly, as I packed the photos back into their folder, "No, I revealed the reality of what you built your life upon. There's a distinction." He exited the courtroom in silence, his expensive attorneys trailing behind him like somber mourners at a funeral. Justice wasn't just served, it was presented as a gift with a bow. 6 months later, I found myself in the garden behind what was officially my home, watching the sunset transform the sky over Grandma Patricia's roses that she had planted many decades ago. The legal battle was concluded, but more significantly, I had finally discovered the tranquility that comes with knowing you're precisely where you belong. The fallout from that courtroom showdown was even more gratifying than the victory itself. Judge Crawford resigned within a week, citing health issues that no one believed. The State Judicial Review Board initiated an investigation that revealed a pattern of dubious choices in cases involving my father's political allies, while my father's career imploded in a spectacular fashion. The House Ethics Committee launched an inquiry into his exploitation of political connections for personal gain. The State Bar Association began investigating Judge Crawford's connection to my father's numerous legal issues over the years. 3 months later, Congressman Richard Hayes resigned from Congress, citing a desire to spend more time with his family. Those familiar with our family history couldn't help but find the irony in that statement. Yet, I wasn't interested in revenge or witnessing his downfall. I was focused on cultivating the life my grandparents envisioned for me. I upheld Grandpa William's business legacy, infusing the companies with innovative practices that would have made him proud. I implemented employee profit sharing, embraced environmental stewardship, and committed to community investments, values he often discussed but never actualized. The businesses flourished under leadership that prioritized more than mere quarterly earnings. 8 months post-trial, I met David Richardson at a sustainability conference where I spoke on corporate accountability. An environmental engineer specializing in clean manufacturing, he had a passion for designing systems beneficial to both businesses and communities. Our initial conversation spanned 4 hours, delving into topics from renewable energy to the ethical dimensions of inherited wealth. His intelligence, principles, and complete indifference towards my wealth captivated me. "I value people by what they create, not what they inherit," he remarked over coffee after our 3rd date. "What you're crafting with those companies is truly commendable." Within a year, we got engaged and married in the same church where I had eulogized both my grandparents. It was a lovely ceremony, surrounded by good friends and the family I had consciously chosen, rather than the one I was born into. Naturally, my father was absent. As reported, he was preoccupied with federal investigators scrutinizing his political dealings. David and I spent our honeymoon in Ireland, exploring the countryside that was home to Grandma Patricia's ancestors 3 generations back. Standing hand in hand on the sea cliffs overlooking the Atlantic, enveloped by beauty that had stood the test of time, I felt a profound serenity from living authentically. A year later, we established our home in the main house of my childhood. We turned Grandpa William's study into David's workspace and transformed Grandma Patricia's art room into a nursery. Our daughter, Patricia Rose Richardson, graced us with her presence on a perfect spring morning, exactly 2 years after the trial that marked a turning point. She possesses David's gentle spirit and my grandmother's sparkling eyes, assured in the knowledge of being unconditionally loved by parents who consciously chose each other. 18 months later, our son, William David Richardson, arrived with my tenacity and his father's calm demeanor. He will grow up never questioning his worth or being wanted. My children will flourish in the same environment where I learned about love, fidelity, and the essence of family beyond mere biology. They'll hear tales of great-grandparents who taught that the most valuable inheritance is not wealth but values, integrity, and the unwavering belief that they are deserving of love simply for being. My father spent his life pursuing power and prestige, a chase that left him unfulfilled. He sacrificed meaningful relationships for career advancement, ultimately realizing it mattered little when his corruption came to light. Meanwhile, I've inherited something far more precious than any treasure, the insight to discern what truly counts and the fortitude to advocate for it when needed. If this narrative resonates with you, remember to like and subscribe for more tales about family, justice, and the bravery it takes to stand firm for what's right. Often, those who underestimate us learn the most profound lessons about our true resilience. Thank you for being a part of this journey. And always, remember, the most meaningful inheritance isn't monetary or material. It's the values that influence us, the love that supports us, and the security of knowing precisely who we are and our worth. Ultimately, that's the true legacy my grandparents bestowed upon me. Not just financial assurance, but the unshakable awareness that I am deserving of love, capable of strength, and destined for something far greater than the selfish life my father opted for, and that legacy will endure for generations.